I never planned on ruining my boss's life, at least not at first. But after years of stolen credit, public humiliation, and watching him climb the ladder on the backs of people like me, something in me snapped. And when he finally pushed me too far, I didn't just fight back, I made sure he would never recover. Here's how I turned the tables and ended his career in the most spectacular way possible. Introduction: my boss made my life hell, so I ended his career. Hey, Reddit. Long-time lurker, first-time poster. Buckle up because this is a wild ride. I've been sitting on this story for a while, but after seeing some posts here, I figured it was time to share. I won't give too many personal details because, well, you'll see why. So, let me introduce you to the villain of the story, my ex-boss, Greg, not his real name, obviously. Greg was the textbook definition of a corporate parasite, one of those middle managers who contributed absolutely nothing but somehow took credit for everything. If you've ever worked in an office, you know the type. I worked in a mid-sized marketing firm, and I actually loved my job when I first started. I was one of the creative leads, coming up with campaign ideas, strategies, and branding solutions for clients. I was good at it. Clients liked me. My coworkers liked me. I was on track for a promotion. Then Greg showed up. Greg was hired as our department head despite having zero experience in marketing. He came from finance, but he must have sweet-talked the right people in upper management because somehow he got the job. From day one, he made it his mission to make everyone's life miserable, especially mine. At first, it was subtle. He'd take credit for my ideas in meetings. He'd conveniently forget to CC me on important emails. He'd make little comments about my work ethic, trying to plant seeds of doubt in my team. Annoying? Yes. But nothing I couldn't handle. But then things escalated. Greg started actively sabotaging me. He'd change my deadlines last minute and then berate me for being late. He'd approve my proposals and then pretend he never saw them. He'd accidentally delete my reports before big presentations. I started keeping backups of everything, but it didn't matter. Greg was determined to make me look incompetent. I still held on. I figured if I worked hard enough, people would see through his BS. But then Greg did something I could not forgive. The final straw. I tolerated Greg's nonsense for months. I kept my head down, did my work, and told myself that as long as I outperformed expectations, the truth would come out. I even started documenting his behavior, saving emails, logging every instance of sabotage, and keeping detailed notes. I thought that maybe, just maybe, if I gathered enough evidence, HR would do something about it. Then, one day, Greg crossed the line in a way I never saw coming. Our company had landed a massive client, easily the biggest account we'd ever worked with. It was a huge deal, and I had poured everything into crafting the perfect campaign for them. Late nights, weekends, endless revisions. I basically lived in the office for 2 months. And it paid off. The client loved my pitch. They said it was one of the best presentations they'd ever seen. For the first time in a long while, I felt like all my hard work was worth it. Then, at the final contract meeting with the client, Greg did something that still makes my blood boil to this day. He took my presentation, stripped my name from everything, and presented it as his own. I wasn't even invited to the meeting. I only found out what happened when a coworker texted me. Dude, WTF. Greg just presented your campaign. Like, word for word. He's taking all the credit. I remember staring at my phone, feeling my stomach drop. I stormed into the conference room just as the meeting was wrapping up. The client was shaking Greg's hand, telling him what an incredible job he had done. And Greg? That smug, soulless bastard looked me right in the eye and winked. I think that was the moment I snapped. I don't even remember walking out of the building. All I know is that by the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking with rage. I had put up with so much: the gaslighting, the sabotage, the constant humiliation. But this was theft. He stole my work, my success, my future. And at that moment, I made a decision. Greg was going to pay. First thoughts of revenge. The drive home that night was a blur. My mind was spinning, my pulse was pounding, and for the first time in my life, I understood what people meant when they said they were seeing red. I wasn't just angry, I was enraged. I wanted to storm back into that office, flip Greg's desk over, and scream in his face. I wanted to expose him right there in front of everyone, make him admit that he stole my work. But I knew that wouldn't get me what I wanted. Greg was good at manipulating people. If I lost my temper, I'd look like the bad guy. No, I needed something bigger. Smarter. Permanent. At first, I thought about petty revenge, maybe screwing with his car, spreading rumors, or making his life at work just as miserable as he made mine. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized petty wasn't enough. Greg had taken more than just my work. He had taken my reputation. My future. He made me look like an incompetent fool in front of the biggest client we'd ever had. This wasn't about getting even. This was about obliterating him. So I started thinking bigger. What could I do to completely destroy Greg's career? To make sure he never stole another person's work again? To humiliate him so badly that he could never recover? The answer hit me like a freight train. Greg thrived on stealing credit. His entire career was built on taking other people's work and passing it off as his own. But what if I could prove that? What if I could expose him in a way that couldn't be ignored? I didn't just want Greg fired. I wanted to make sure he never worked in this industry again. And that's when the plan started to take shape. Forming the plan. I spent that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking through every possible angle. If I was going to take Greg down, I needed to do it in a way that was undeniable. No room for him to weasel out of it, no plausible deniability, no way for upper management to sweep it under the rug. I started listing out everything I knew about Greg. He never actually did any work. Every project he led was really the work of someone else. He had a habit of deleting emails. I'd lost count of how many times he claimed he never received a request or never saw a report. He was an egomaniac. Greg loved the spotlight. The more public the recognition, the better. He was reckless. He'd gotten comfortable stealing credit because no one had ever called him out. And most importantly, there was proof. I wasn't the only one Greg had screwed over. I wasn't the only one who had emails, drafts, and files that could prove Greg didn't do a damn thing. If I could gather enough dirt, not just from me but from everyone he had wronged, I could build an airtight case. So I decided on a 3-step plan. Step 1. Gather evidence. I needed hard proof that Greg stole work. Emails, timestamps, version histories, anything that showed his pattern of theft. Step 2. Set the trap. If Greg loved taking credit, I'd make sure he did it one more time. But this time I'd make sure it was public. Step 3. Drop the nuke. Once the trap was sprung, I'd unleash everything. To upper management, to HR, to our biggest clients. Greg's entire career would go up in flames. The best part? I wouldn't even have to lie or exaggerate. All I had to do was let Greg be Greg. Now, I just needed to start gathering my ammunition. Preparation. The next few weeks were spent playing the long game. I knew that if I rushed this, I'd leave gaps. Holes that Greg could slip through. Excuses he could use to save himself. No, I had to be methodical. Step 1. Gathering evidence. First, I went through my own files. I had backups of almost everything I'd ever worked on. Drafts, emails, Slack messages, even voice recordings from meetings where Greg approved my ideas before presenting them as his own. But my evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed more. So, I started reaching out to my coworkers, the ones who hated Greg just as much as I did. And let me tell you, it didn't take much convincing. Lisa, one of our senior designers, had emails proving that Greg took credit for her work on a major campaign last year. Jake, one of our strategists, had an entire folder of deleted email threads where Greg had forgotten to CC him, then claimed Jake had dropped the ball. Mia, one of our account managers, had receipts of Greg straight up lying to clients about who worked on what. Turns out, Greg had been screwing over everyone, not just me. With their help, I built a master file, a timeline of Greg's lies, thefts, and sabotage, complete with screenshots, email chains, and version histories. By the time I was done, I had a 20-page dossier proving, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that Greg was a fraud. But that was only part of the plan. Step 2. Setting the trap. I needed one last, undeniable piece of evidence. One final theft that would seal Greg's fate. So, I decided to create something just for him. A completely fake, booby-trapped campaign. The first stage. Now that I had a mountain of dirt on Greg, it was time to give him just enough rope to hang himself. I needed one last theft. Something big, something undeniable. And I had just the idea. I created a fake campaign proposal from scratch. A fully fleshed-out marketing strategy, complete with data analysis, customer personas, ad concepts, and rollout plans. A sleek, professional presentation with just enough industry jargon to sound impressive but just vague enough that Greg wouldn't realize something was off. A few strategic mistakes hidden in the fine details. Minor errors that any real marketing pro would catch, but Greg, the fraud, would be too clueless to notice. Then I set the bait. I accidentally left my laptop unlocked in a meeting room. I printed out a few copies of the proposal and left them sitting on my desk, just waiting to be stolen. I even mentioned to a coworker, loudly, when Greg was within earshot, that I was working on something big for an upcoming pitch. Took less than 48 hours. Greg took the bait hard. One of my coworkers overheard him bragging on a call to upper management about an exciting new campaign he was putting together. Another spotted him in the office late at night, printing out pages from my document. The next morning, an official company-wide meeting invite popped up in my inbox. Strategic pitch presentation, led by Greg. He was going to present my fake campaign as his own. Exactly as planned. Escalation. The moment I saw that meeting invite, I knew it was go time. Greg had taken the bait so perfectly, it was almost insulting. Not only did he steal the campaign, but he was stupid enough to present it in front of senior executives, department heads, and even the CEO. This wasn't just a team meeting, this was a big deal. I played it cool. Acted like I had no idea. If Greg suspected anything, he might double-check his stolen work, and I couldn't risk that. Instead, I made sure the right people were watching when the trap snapped shut. I forwarded the master file of Greg's thefts to HR, but with a scheduled send, time to hit their inbox mid-presentation. I tipped off my coworkers, telling them to be in the meeting and act surprised when Greg presented his work. I even invited one of our biggest clients, knowing Greg would love to show off in front of them. The stage was set. Then the day of the meeting arrived. I walked in, took my seat near the back, and watched as Greg strolled up to the front of the room, grinning like he had personally invented marketing itself. He cleared his throat, thanked everyone for coming, and launched into his big campaign pitch. Slide after slide, he presented my fake campaign word for word. I stole a glance at Lisa and Jake, my coworkers who helped gather dirt. Lisa's mouth was slightly open, feigning shock. Jake was furrowing his brows, pretending to take notes like something was off. But the real fun started about 10 minutes in when the CEO himself interrupted Greg. CEO, Greg, this is interesting, but something isn't adding up. Can you walk me through how you arrived at these projections? Greg hesitated. He didn't know. The numbers were fake, designed to fall apart under scrutiny. Greg shuffled through his notes. Well, we pulled this from, the market data analysis. The CEO's frown deepened. What market data analysis? Greg was sweating now. I could see the moment he realized he had no real answers. Then, like clockwork, HR walked into the room, holding printouts of my email. Game. Over. Climax. The room went dead silent as HR entered. You could feel the shift. 1 second, Greg was standing at the front of the room, basking in his stolen glory, and the next, the walls were caving in around him. The head of HR, a no-nonsense woman named Karen, yeah, ironic, cleared her throat. Greg, we need to have a word. Now. Greg laughed nervously. Oh, can it wait? I'm in the middle of... Karen. No, it cannot. By now, the CEO was glaring at him, and the department heads were whispering to each other. The tension was delicious. Karen turned to the room. Apologies for the interruption, but some concerning information has come to our attention. She held up a stack of printed emails, my emails. This meeting is over. Greg's face drained of color. He tried to grab his laptop, but the CEO cut in. CEO, Greg. Sit. Greg sat. He had no choice. Then, right there, in front of everyone, Karen started reading through my evidence. The stolen projects. The deleted emails. The fake campaign he had just tried to pass off as his own. You could actually hear the realization spread across the room. Murmurs, gasps, people shaking their heads in disbelief. And then, the final nail in the coffin. The client, who Greg had just tried to impress, turned to the CEO and said, "Wait, this campaign, we've seen this before. My name pitched something nearly identical to us last month. Checkmate." Greg tried one last move. This is all a misunderstanding. My name must have leaked my work but I didn't even have to say a word. Lisa, my coworker, stood up. Actually, Greg, I have timestamped drafts showing my name created this campaign weeks ago. You stole it. Jake added. Not to mention the dozen other projects you've taken credit for. Greg opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Then the CEO stood up. He looked at Karen. Handle this. Greg was done. Boss's reaction. Greg sat there, frozen, as the weight of what just happened crashed down on him. You could almost see his brain short-circuiting, trying to find a way out. But there wasn't one. HR wasn't done. Karen motioned to security and two guys, actual security guards, stepped into the room. Greg's eyes flicked between them and the CEO, probably realizing that this wasn't just a talking to. Greg. Wait, let's be reasonable. CEO. Reasonable? You just tried to pass off stolen work in front of an executive board and a major client. Greg. I didn't know it was stolen. Me. Then explain why you deleted my name from the original drafts? Boom. Greg knew he was caught. He turned red, then pale, then red again. He was panicking. Greg. Look, I can fix this. We can say it was a team effort. The client spoke up. We don't do business with frauds. And that was it. HR handed Greg a termination letter right then and there. No severance. No resignation to save face. Immediate termination for gross misconduct. And to really drive it home, security escorted him out of the building in front of everyone. As he was walking out, he shot me a look, half hatred, half pleading. I just smiled and waved. It was over, or at least it should have been. But Greg, being the idiot that he was, wasn't done just yet. The final touch. I thought Greg would slink away in shame after being publicly humiliated and fired on the spot. But nope, he was too arrogant, too delusional to accept defeat. A few days after his glorious walk of shame, I got a message from an unknown number. Greg. I know what you did. Oh, this was gonna be fun. I ignored him at first, but then came more messages. You think you're so smart? You won't last a month without me there. I'll make sure you never work in this industry again. You have no idea who you just messed with. Greg was unraveling. Then, the real kicker, I found out from Lisa that Greg was trying to sue the company for wrongful termination. His argument, that I had set him up and that he was the real victim. Unbelievable. So, I decided to deliver one final blow. See, in my deep dive into Greg's shady habits, I had uncovered something far worse than just idea theft. Greg had been falsifying expense reports. Buried in company records were thousands of dollars in fake reimbursements. Meals that never happened, hotel stays that didn't exist, even entire flights he supposedly took for client meetings. I had flagged it in my master file but didn't need it to take him down at the time. But now it was time to pull the pin on that grenade. I forwarded everything to HR and the CFO. Within 24 hours, Greg's termination was escalated to a full-blown fraud investigation. Not only was his lawsuit thrown out instantly, but he was also facing potential criminal charges for embezzlement. Greg went from trying to ruin my career to fighting to stay out of jail. And just like that, the last piece of my revenge clicked into place. What happened to the boss? Greg's downfall didn't just stop at his firing. The fraud investigation moved quickly, and soon upper management was in full damage control mode. The company was forced to issue a public statement, distancing itself from Greg's actions. The CEO had to personally apologize to several clients who were affected by Greg's lies and mismanagement. But the real kicker? Greg was blacklisted from the industry. I heard from a few people in the industry that word spread fast about what happened. No one wanted to touch him. Potential employers weren't even willing to look at his resume. Too many red flags. His reputation was absolutely ruined. He even had a few legal battles on his hands, too. The fraud charges stuck, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was still dealing with the consequences. The company launched a formal lawsuit against him for the embezzlement, and I got wind that he might have ended up paying back a significant chunk of the money he'd stolen, just to avoid going to jail. In the end, Greg went from being the guy who stole credit for everything to the guy who would do anything to try to save his own skin. He became a cautionary tale. Someone who tried to ride on the coattails of others and got crushed by his own ego. I honestly don't know where he is now. Last I heard, he moved to a small town, probably working some dead-end job trying to scrape together whatever dignity he had left. But wherever he is, I know one thing for sure, he'll never step foot in a marketing firm again. Not with that stain on his name. What happened to the protagonist? So what happened to me after all of that? Well, to put it simply, my career exploded. When Greg was gone, I was able to step up and fill the void he left behind. My hard work, the projects he'd stolen from me, everything I'd done. It all got the recognition it deserved. I got more visibility from senior leadership than I ever thought possible. And within a few months, I was promoted to a position I'd been eyeing for years. The best part? I didn't just get a new title. I finally started leading projects of my own. I was no longer just the guy in the background, churning out work for someone else to steal. I had the freedom to build my own team, make my own decisions, and showcase what I could really do. Clients I'd worked with while Greg was around reached out to me directly, telling me how much they respected my work. Several even said they'd been horrified by what Greg had done and were relieved to see me take the reins. It felt like everything came full circle. I'm not gonna lie, there were moments of doubt. The revenge, the planning, the stress, it wasn't easy. There were a few times where I wondered if I'd gone too far or if I'd made a mistake by pulling the trigger on such an elaborate plan. But every time I looked at my new position, my new opportunities, the respect I had earned, I realized I had done the right thing. And I was finally free from Greg's shadow. Conclusion, does he regret it, or was it the best decision? Looking back, I have to admit it was a roller coaster. In the heat of it, I never fully processed how much I was putting on the line. There were moments of satisfaction, for sure. Watching Greg crumble, seeing the truth finally come out, and knowing that I was vindicated, that felt incredible. It felt like justice. But there was a part of me that still questions whether I could have handled it differently. Did I need to go to such extreme lengths? Could I have just walked away from the situation, found a new job, and left Greg to face his own consequences without dragging myself through all that stress and manipulation? On the other hand, I don't think I would have been able to sleep at night if I hadn't gone all in. I had worked my ass off for years, and Greg thought he could just walk all over me. He humiliated me in front of the whole company, stole from me, and tried to ruin my reputation, and if I didn't do something, who would? So, while there's a part of me that still feels some guilt about the whole thing, I think deep down, I know that I did the right thing. I took control of my career, I exposed the truth, and I made sure someone who'd been hurting others for years couldn't get away with it anymore. At the end of the day, it wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Thoughts on justice? Was revenge truly the right course, or could there have been another way? This is where it gets tricky, and I'll be honest, I've had a lot of time to think about this in the months since it all went down. Was revenge the right thing to do? Or did I just get caught up in the moment and let my anger cloud my judgment? In a perfect world, I could have just confronted Greg directly, maybe filed a complaint, and let the company handle it without all the drama. Hell, I could have left that toxic environment and moved on with my life, letting him deal with the fallout on his own. But that's not the reality we live in, is it? Greg wasn't just a bad boss, he was a predator. He took advantage of people for years and nobody had the guts to stand up to him. When I realized that the company wasn't going to do anything unless I made noise, I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. I didn't want to be a passive victim anymore, watching as he ruined other people's careers while gliding through life unscathed. Did I go too far? Maybe. But I don't think Greg would have learned his lesson if I played by the book. He was too slick, too used to getting away with things. Sometimes you have to give people like him a taste of their own medicine to make them realize that their actions have real consequences. That said, I'll never be the kind of person who revels in someone else's suffering. I didn't do this out of malice or joy, I did it because I had to. If I hadn't acted, Greg would have kept hurting people. So, in a way, it wasn't just about me. It was about making sure he couldn't keep pulling this crap with anyone else. I'd like to think that if I were faced with the same situation again, I'd still go for the high road. But honestly, I'm not sure I'd have the strength to sit back and watch someone like Greg get away with it again. Advice for others, what the protagonist advises those who want to take revenge on their boss. If you're reading this and feeling like you're stuck in a situation like mine, where your boss is taking advantage of you, stealing your work, or treating you like garbage, I'm going to tell you one thing, don't just sit back and take it. But also don't rush into revenge without thinking it through. Here's what I've learned. Take a step back before you act. When you're angry, it's easy to jump into something impulsive, but trust me, you don't want to act out of pure emotion. Take a breath, look at your options, and figure out what you're trying to achieve. Are you trying to get back at them, or do you just want to expose the truth? Sometimes there's a more strategic way to get justice. Document everything. This was key for me. If you have any doubt that your boss is treating you unfairly, start keeping track of everything. Emails, messages, meetings, whatever. This isn't just about gathering dirt, it's about protecting yourself and making sure you have evidence if things go south. Know when to play the long game. Revenge doesn't always have to be immediate. It can be subtle. Plan things out. If you're smart about it, your boss will eventually reveal their true nature, and when they do, you'll have the upper hand. Make sure your actions have a purpose. I didn't do what I did just because I wanted to hurt Greg. It was about getting the truth out there, making sure he couldn't hurt anyone else, and taking control of my career. Don't do something that will just leave you feeling empty later. Have a reason for your revenge. Don't let it consume you. Revenge can be a double-edged sword. It's easy to get so wrapped up in it that it becomes your whole focus. It can turn you into someone you don't want to be. Remember, the goal is to regain control of your life, not to let your obsession with getting even derail everything else. And finally, don't let anyone tell you that taking a stand is wrong. If your boss is exploiting you, treating you like crap, or stealing your work, they're the one in the wrong. You deserve respect, recognition, and the freedom to build your own career without someone constantly pushing you down. If it means taking some drastic steps to protect yourself and your future, then do it. Just make sure it's done smartly, and remember, justice is always better than revenge for revenge's sake. So, to anyone out there feeling like I did, good luck. Be smart. And don't settle for less than you deserve.